Good afternoon. Welcome to one more session on the geometry. I know in your previous session you've worked with Mrs. Splinter and you've covered the grade 11 theorems. Now, I always put emphasis, learners, on whenever you work any sum in geometry, it's important that you need to know your theorems off by heart. Right? So there are 7, or should I say there are 9 theorems for grade 11, and today we're going to look at your 2 grade 12 theorem. Yes, that is the proportionality theorem and your similarity. A warm welcome especially to New Orleans, Usazazu, welcome to all you guys. I hope the others, let's make it interactive, and please, if you have any questions, send it to me. So let's hope we're going to have a wonderful session. Let's just look at a PowerPoint presentation. So what is the first thing that you need to know before we're going to get to the theorems itself? In grade 10, you've covered a theorem that we call the midpoint theorem. Just to refresh your memory in that, what is the midpoint theorem? The midpoint theorem states the line joining the midpoints of 2 sides of a triangle. Right? It's a line. Now let's just put that. You see, there's the line, and it joins the 2 midpoints. Now, if we talk about the midpoint, D is the midpoint of AB, because midpoint means it cuts in half. And then also E is the midpoint of AC. Now, that is what I'm referring to. There is a line, we join them, and those two, or that line, D is the midpoint of AB, and E is the midpoint of EC. If you have that, then what does it mean? It says there, the line joining the midpoints of 2 sides of a triangle is parallel to the third side, right? It's parallel to the third side. Now that's what it means. Parallel, and then secondly, it's half the length of the third side. So just to recap grade 12s, if you have 2 midpoints, D is the midpoint of AB and E is the midpoint of AC. If we have that, then DE is parallel to BC. That is the one assumption that you can make. And secondly, that DE is half the value of BC. That is just to recap what you have covered in grade 10. Because this theorem is what you're going to use for matric. Now let's look at your proportionality theorem. What is the theorem and what do you need to know? Can you see something similar there? We have 2 lines parallel, and it says a line drawn parallel to one side of a triangle. Now let's just recap or look at that. DE is parallel to BC. So we have a line that's drawn parallel to one side of a triangle. So DE is parallel to BC. Now if you have that situation, what is the proportionality theorem? Then it says it divides the other 2 sides in the same proportion. And that is what your proportionality theorem is all about. Right? Now let's just see how do we write that in maths. If DE is parallel to BC, and that's indicated, that line DE is parallel to BC. So what does a proportion means? Then it says that AD over DB. Just look at what the proportion is. On the left-hand side, on the side AB, the ratio there, we say AD over DB will then be equal to AE over EC. Now grade 12s, this is so important that you need to know this proportionality theorem. What it says, if you have one side parallel to one side of the triangle, then it divides the other two sides in the same proportion. And that is what the proportion is. AD over DB is equal to AE over EC. Right? Let me stop there just with that, because there are more in other information, or there's corollaries that I'm coming to. But let's just get to that and let's go to a sum immediately. There's hi, especially hello, there's Bonke. Bonke says, hi sir. We have Martha on here. And Zikufle, hi, welcome to you too. Guys, let's keep that communication. Now let's just have a look at one sum quickly so that you have that understanding. It says here, in the diagram below, we have triangle VRK. There we have the triangle there. Right? What's given to us? It says P is on VR. You with me? That is P. There is VR. And they say T is on VK. Right? T is on VK. Such that, and this is quite important, let's make it clear, that PT is parallel to RK. Now, learners, grade 12, I said, the minute you have one side parallel to another side of a triangle, then what can we derive from that? Then we can write the two sides in a proportion. And remember what we've used, and let's start with that one. We will say VP over PR is equal to VT over TK. So you can write down that proportion. Now what they give us also here, it says VT is equal to 4 units. That is the 4 over there. It also says PR is 9 units. There I wrote in the number 9 or the 9 units. TK is 6 units. And VP is 2x minus 10 units. Advisable learners, whenever they give you information, read, make sure you understand, and write the information on your sketch. So, okay, so what is a proportionality theorem? It says, one side parallel to a side of a triangle divides the other two in the same proportion. Now, let's write down the proportion. It will be VP, right, that is that top, over PR, and that's going to be equal to top over the bottom equals top over the bottom. That is what it means, same proportion. So it's VP over PR equals, what is the top part there? It's VT over TK. And please, very important, you need to give a reason. That is what geometry is all about. The minute you write a statement, you need to write down a reason. Why is that true? That is true because PT is parallel to RK. Right? Remember, that is what the theorem says. If you have two sides parallel, then the other two is the same proportion. Now let's just replace the unknowns with the values. So VP is 2x minus 10 over, what is PR? It is 9 equals, what is VT? It is 4. And what is TK? It is 6. So can you see, once you have the information and you write it in your sketch, it's easy to derive from here to your answer. Now, okay, there we have a ratio equal to a ratio. That is what we call in maths a proportion. What is the easiest way or the best way to solve a proportion? Yes, is to cross multiply. That means we cross multiply. That's quite the easiest or the best way. There are other options as well. So if we cross multiply, we are going to say 6 times the 2x minus 10. And please take your time, write your extra steps to make sure that you don't make a mistake. Because normally learners will only multiply the 6 with the 2x. But remember, there's still the minus 10. So mathematically what it says, 6 must be multiplied with the expression there on top. So it's 6 times 2 minus x. And then we have the 4 must be multiplied with the 9. See that we cross multiply. And now people, just a bit of algebra. 6 times 2x, that is my 12x. 6 times minus 10, that's minus 60. 4 times 9, that I can hear you shout, so that is 36. So in order to solve x, we have an equation. So to solve an equation, we have the additive inverse. What it means, we first want to get rid of the minus 60. So we add plus 60 to this side as well to that side. I know some teachers will say take over the minus 60, it becomes plus 60. But normally it says additive inverse. So if I add 60 there, I will have only 12x that remains. And then if we add 60 to the other side, then we're going to have 12x is therefore 96. And if I want x, all that we have to do, we divide both sides by 12, and then x is therefore equal to, right, I can see a lot of answers coming in. Thank you guys, I like what I see. Martha, Masizana, they all say bonke, they say, sir, my answer is 8 units. So you can see grade 12s, if you have the understanding about what is your proportionality theorem, if you know that, to implement is not so bad. And that is a typical exam question. All right, let's go continue with our PowerPoint. So let's look at corollaries. What does corollaries means? Variations. How can this also be applicable to other sums? Let's have a look at it again. We have DE parallel to BC. So if DE is parallel to BC, remember what is true. We can write down AB over DB is equal to AE over EC. Top over the bottom equals top over the bottom. But let's have a look at the list. All that is applicable to the theorem. Now, depending on the information they give you, that's going to tell you which one to use. Let's just run through it very quickly. Can you see the first one that we know, or the first corollary, is AB over AD. Now let's just look at what is that. AB is the whole side over AD, which is top. You see, what you do on the one side, you must do on the other. So the whole side over the top is equal to, what is the whole side here? AC. What is the top? AE. Can you see how that first corollary, how it works? Let's look at the second one. AB, the whole one, over the bottom. So it's AB over DB. What we do the one side, we do the other. Whole side over the bottom. What is the whole side? It's AC. What is the bottom? EC. Can you see how that number 2 comes in? 3, it says BD over DA. You see how we work from bottom? Bottom over top equals the side. What is bottom? CE or EC. What is top? Obviously that is, it should be DB, that is EC. Right? So AB, whole one over the bottom DB, whole one AC, the bottom is EC. Here we have D or BD over DA, bottom over top, bottom is CE over EA, and then just the last one, BD over BA. Right? BD is the bottom over the whole, bottom here is CE over the whole CA. So learners, these are, yes, that's all applicable to your proportionality theorem. But the most common one that you will always use is top over the bottom equals top over the bottom. But bear in mind, these are always or also possibilities, right? Let's just go to another corollary. If it says, if a line cuts two sides of a triangle proportionally, right, then the right line is parallel to the third side. So what I'm saying, if they give you, if AD is equal to DB, right, if they give you that, if AD is equal to DB, right, and EAE is equal to EC. So what can you derive from that? Then it means DE is parallel to BC. Now I know you're going to say, sir, it can be a bit confusing, but just concentrate, learners. It's not so hard. The theorem says if two sides are parallel, then the other two sides are proportion. If you have the two sides proportion, then it means these two sides are parallel, right? And just maybe the last one that says, it's quite a mouthful, the line passing through the midpoint of one side of a triangle parallel to another side. Now let's just see what they mean. Can you see what they give us? This side, DE, is parallel to BC, right? And AD is equal to DB. What can you derive from that? So now you can write down that AE is equal to EC and DE is half of that. Right? Let me just show that to you. If AD is equal to DB and DE is parallel to BC, then AE is equal to EC and DE is half of BC. Right? So those are the things that you need to understand. And just lastly, so that you don't get confused, what is the concept of proportionality? What does it mean? Here, if you look, I have two lines there. AB is 6, BC is 4, DE is 9, and EF is 6. Let's just see how we write that as a proportion. AB to BC. Can you see if you talk about AB to BC is 6 to 4. You agree with me? And if you write that in a simpler form, divide both by 2, we get 3 to 2. Now if you look at the bottom, DE to EF at 6 to 9. Divide both by 3, then you can see also have 3 to 2. So this side is the same proportion as the other one. They're not equal. Right? So it says yes, although these two are proportional, it doesn't mean that AB is equal to DE. Right? And we can see it's not equal. But if I write the proportion of AC, which is AB over BC, and I write the proportion or the ratio of DE over EF, then we can get to the same ratio there. Right? The same proportion. So I hope that is just the understanding that you need to know when it comes to the proportionality theorem. But I will put again emphasis grade 12. The most important part, if one side is parallel to another side of a triangle, it divides the other two sides in the same proportion. And remember the corollaries, top over the bottom equals top over the bottom. Remember that and your other corollaries. Right? I hope you got a good understanding. Let's go back to our sums. Here too I said, or what's given here, O is the center of a circle below. So that is what we have there. And then we also have the OM, right? OM is parallel to AC. Now what does that mean? We can say, okay sir, that immediately, that means, let's take your pen, parallel means it's 90 degrees. You agree with me? But, let's go and see what they also give us. The radius of the circle is 5 centimeters. Now we know what the radius is, right? It's a line from a center of a circle to any point on the circumference. Right? Remember, OM is not the radius. You agree with me? Because OM is not on the circumference. So if they say the radius of the circle is 5 centimeters, that says that is 5 and that is 5. You agree with me? That's the radius, is 5 centimeters and that. Also what they say is that BC, which is at the bottom, is equal to 8 centimeters. So advisable, remember that, write your information over here, right? So once again, what's given? OM, it's perpendicular on AC. Thanks Martha for the tip there. So OM, it's perpendicular, and the word perpendicular says 90 degrees, right? The radius is 5, so OA is 5, OB is 5, and then BC is also equal to 8. So write the information on your sketch, and if you do that, then it will be easy for you to get to your answer, right? Let's look at the questions. The first question says, write down the size of angle BCA. Right? Write down the size of angle BCA. Now come on kids, this is not a problem because sir, we've covered this in our previous chapter, or should I say previous session. One of the theorems. If you have a diameter, because if O is the center, AB is the diameter. And remember there's a theorem that states the angle on the circumference that's subtended by the diameter, what is the value of angle C? That is equal to 90 degrees. So yes, we can immediately say, therefore, angle BCA is equal to 90 degrees. And obviously your reason, the angle subtended by the diameter. So these are things that if you know your theorems quite well, that should be quite easy. Right? I see John and Masizana said, sir, that is exactly the reason we gave. They said angle C is 90 angles subtended by the diameter. Bonke and John said it's so beautiful. It's 90, it's angle subtended by the diameter. Thank you guys. I like the interaction. So you can see, if we know our theorems quite well, this is how easy these sums could be. Right? So let's continue. So if that is BC, A is equal to 90 degrees, we can immediately put the 90 degrees there. Now learners, now something you can see something. If two angles there are 90 degrees, what can you say about MO and BC? Right? Back to previous. If these two angles are 90 degrees, that means they are equal. What can we say of the line MO and BC? Right? Come on guys, you can send me the answer. That is, again, some of the stuff we've dealt with. Let me just see, there's more messages that came through. Okay, I don't know the numbers, just 366 that says 8 units. Umtiza High School is also with us. Okay, Umtiza High School, welcome to you. And then Umtiza already gave me the answers here, the lengths of AM and AC. Thank you guys, I like the interaction. Continue with your answers. So, If these two are equal, then you probably agree with me by saying, sir, then these two lines must be parallel. Why is it parallel? It's parallel because what do we call these two? We call that what type of angles? Absolutely corresponding angles. Right, so that's my parallel lines. That's my transversal. So then it means these two are equal, then this is parallel. Now let's go to our proportionality theorem. What does it state? It says, yes, if that side is equal to that, and this one is parallel to that, that's part of our grade 10 theorem. We can immediately say, we can also say, so OM is half of BC. You with me? OM is half of BC. So if BC is 8, we can immediately say MO or OM is equal to 4. Right? And there I can see the answers are coming in. Thank you guys. Perfect. So now they ask, calculate AM with reasons. And by doing that, you can immediately see, man, guys, I've got my answer. So all right, let's write it down. We're going to say, you can write down, yes, OA is equal to OB, it's 5. It's given in our information there. You can say, yes, OM is half of BC because of parallel lines. And then we can go straight into finding the value of AM. And how do we do that? Yes, I can see the answers are flying in. So if you look at triangle, so if I say here, in triangle AMO, right? That is the right angle triangle there. In any right angle triangle, there's a theorem of Pythagoras that says that the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides. So the statement we can write down, so AM squared, remember where's your hypotenuse? It's opposite the 90 degrees, that is the longer side. So the longer side is the sum of the other two. So AM squared will be equal to AO squared minus the value of OM squared. And yes, we're going to say that is the Pythagoras. So if we put the values in there, what is AO? AO is 5 squared. What is OM? That is 4 squared. So that gives me 25 minus 16. Right? Just get me another color here. And that gives me equal to 9. So if I want AM is the square root of 9, and that is equal to 3. Right, I see my answers coming in. I also can't keep up. I see a lot of guys sending their WhatsApp messages. Thank you guys. The theorem is coming all in. Pythagoras. Mount Frere is also saying so. We also here. Holy Cross. Amazizi Senior Secondary School. Thank you very much. Thank you for all the information. Might not even answer all your things, but also the answers that's giving in here, that I see on here, is just what I want. And yes, is a question that Dickie asked is, this is exam, sir? Yes, Dickie, this was an exam question. So it shows, if I know my theorems quite well, exam questions shouldn't be so hard, especially the geometry part, right? So let's just continue with our practices. Then secondly, they ask us now, write down the area of triangle AOM, which you see is the top one, compared to the area of triangle ABC. So okay, now we can start writing down the answers. We know this value here, AM is equal to 3, right? So if that is equal to 3, then we know obviously MC is going to be equal to 3. Are you with me, guys? So if we need to work out what is the one area proportion or the ratio from one to the other one, then all that we have to do, we work with right angle triangles. So the area of any right angle triangle should not be a problem, right? We know the area because the area of a right angle triangle says it's a half base times perpendicular height. So if we take the area of triangle AOM, then the area is equal to a half base times height, right? The same with the area of ABC, it's a half base times height, right? It's two triangles with 90 degrees. So what is the base of the small triangle? Remember, we work with AOM. Let's have a look at it. It's a half times, my base is, there you can see is 4. You with me? Times, what is my height? There you can see is equal to 3. You with me, guys? 2, let's look at the big triangle. The base, there we have it. It's times 8. And what is the height? Is a 3 and the 3. That gives me 6. And therefore we can write down 4 times 3 is 12, and half of 12 is 6. You agree with me? And there we can say 8 times 6 is 48, and half of that is 24. Or we can say half of 8 is 4, and 4 times 6 is equal to 24. And then we can just write that in a simpler form, that 6 is to 4, 24 is the same as 1 is to 4. And remember, how do we do that? We divide both sides by 6. So the area of the one triangle to the area of the big triangle means 1, 2, 4. And again, learners, it's just a matter of, do I know some of my information? Just see some of the questions here. Let me just go there. There's some of the guys that says or ask, this is not paper 1, guys. It is paper 2. Right? It is paper 2, remember? Euclidean geometry. Your paper 1 consists out of 6 other components. Paper 2, 4 components. And Euclidean geometry, remember there's also the analytical geometry. So the Euclidean geometry is the last part. We're talking about the circle geometry, where all your theorems are. This is applicable, this is grade 12 work. You had to cover 2 grade 12 theorems. The proportionality, and obviously I'm going to do the similarity. So it's fine. I hope that is what answer your questions, but thanks for the comments, guys. Let's look at one challenging question here. If you look at the sketch alone, you're going to say, sir, it looks frightening. How do I approach a sum? Always try to understand and study your sketch so that you know exactly what to do if you have to answer it. It says here, GB is parallel to FC. Now, if I just keep this part away, let me just use something else. Let's look at that. Can you see this triangle AFC? GB is parallel to FC. There it's being indicated. Now remember the theorem that says if one side is parallel to a side of a triangle, you can write down a proportion. Now remember, ignore the proportion. You can write down AG over GF equals AB over BC. And again, there can be few other corollaries. But just because these two are parallel. Now if I close this side, can you see EB is parallel to DC? They give you that. Right? EB is parallel to DC. So, top part is AE over the bottom is ED equals to AB top part over BC. So, it's just one way of looking at this. So, as you can see, try to get the understanding of your sketch. From there, let's write down more information. It says there, AC is 6 centimeters. Now let's just take this quickly and I make it nice and clear for you. What is AC? It is this whole side there. Right? That whole side AC. There they tell you that is equal to 6 centimeters. Right? Then also what they say is that AB over BC is equal to 2. Now if we say AB over BC is equal to 2, we obviously know that it is the same meaning as 2 over 1. Any value means a value over 1. Now it's AB over BC. It has a ratio 2-ish to 1. Right? It's given there. Right? So how does this work? If the whole side is 6 centimeters, but we have a ratio that says the top compared to the bottom is 2 to 1, this is half of that. So in terms of centimeters, if the whole one is 6, then BC must be half of AB. But they must add up to 6. Now if I have to write that in terms of centimeters, AB versus BC, can you guys send me quickly that answer? Let's just look at it. If AC is 6 centimeters, but AB, according to BC, has a ratio 2-ish to 1. Can you see that one is double that one? Then what is the centimeters of AB and BC? What are the centimeters? While you think, let me just look at what they ask. 3.1, calculate the reasons of AH, there's AH, over ED, right? And there, the answers is flying in. Martha said, sir, that is quite easy. I don't have to even think. Other answers are coming through. Jamangila, AB is 4. Okay, I don't know the names. Please, guys, sometimes just write in your names. Bishop Demont, Imtiza. The answers are all coming through. Thank you, guys. Perfect. So if it's 2-ish to 1, you agree with me. So that's going to be 4 centimeter versus 2 centimeter. I mean, that is logic. Right? This one is half of that. So 2 is half of 4. And together, they form 6 centimeters. So you see how you need to work with these sketches. If you work like that and understanding, then you can see it's not so hard. Now let's look at the question. AH over ED. Now, the ratio, let's just cover this part again. The ratio of AB over BC is 2-ish to 1. Now, if those are my parallel sides, let me just add it here also so you can see. If this side is parallel to that one, then the ratio of this is equal to the ratio of that. So if that is 2-ish to 1, I can also say that is 2-ish to 1. Are you with me? Now let's just, to make I'm not confused, let's write 2y over 1y. Remember, that's not centimeters. It is just a ratio. Right? So now we have AH, which is the same as that. Right? And then HE, which is the same as BC. Right? Now, how can we write down or start writing down this? We can write down now AH, just with me here, over HE is equal to 2 over 1. AH over HE is also 2-ish to 1. Right? Or maybe I should write down as 2y over 1y. Why do we say that? Because of HB, remember your reason? This HB is parallel to EC. Remember, whenever you write down a proportionality, just make sure you understand that. So what can we derive from that is that, give me another color. So AE over ED. Right, let's do AE, right, over ED. It's again, if you look at that triangle, there's my two parallel sides, that one and that one. It's 2:1. So AE over ED, we can also write is 2:1. Right? And for that reason, obviously, we know that BE is parallel to CD. Right? So just take note, guys, how we work with that. So then if we go from there, then we can see that to that is 2:1, which means that whole part there, it's 2-ish, and that whole part there is 2:1. Now from there, we can now start writing down. So then ED, if we cross multiply, remember, because we can do cross multiplication, we're going to work out that ED is going to be 1,5. Remember, if we cross multiply, we can get to this answer. And therefore we can write, so AH over ED, what gives you 2 over 1,5. And therefore, if you want to write that as a nice number, we can just multiply or double that to get rid of the decimal, but we can leave it like that. If you multiply the top part by 2, we can get 4. If you multiply the bottom by 2, we will get obviously equal to 3. So there are learners that gave the answer 4 over 3 or 4-ish to 3. And that's exactly what we want. All right. All right, guys, let's just go to the second theorem so that at least I can cover that. We don't have a lot of time. Let's just look at the last theorem. Let's look at the PowerPoint. And that is our similarity one. What does the similarity theorem is all about, or what does it say? If angle A is equal to angle D, and angle B is equal to angle E, and then thirdly, angle C is equal to angle F, then this triangle is similar to that one. So what is similarity, or what does it mean? The three angles of the one triangle is equal to the three angles of another one. So if two triangles are similar, then we can write down a proportion. And if you look at how the proportion works, we can write down it's according to the two triangles. AB over DE, can you see the left side over the left side, equals AC over DF equals BC over EF. So if two triangles are similar, that means the three angles of this triangle is equal to the three angles of that one, then we can write down this proportion. And that is the most important part that you need to understand about your similarity theorem. At least I need to show you just one sum on this. And that is this sketch that looks very frightening and says, sir, look at the numbers, look at, the lines. But get focused, guys. Let's see what they tell us. AB is a tangent. Now remember, there are three tangent theorems. O is the center of a circle. And then they say AC. Let's just look at that. AC is equal to AO. See that? And then BA is parallel to CE. And that's indicated there. Just make it nice and clear. Right? So what do they ask? Show that C2 is equal to D1. Right? Now, grade 12s, looking at sketches like this, what is very frightening is, sir, where do I start? The information they give you, people, you must work with that. Right? They don't give you parallel lines for nothing. It is there for a purpose. You must use it. They don't say that AC and AO are equal for nothing. You have to use it. Now let's look at what is the meaning of parallel lines. Parallel lines means pairs of angles. So if these are the parallel lines, AC is a transversal, you see the Z, what can we immediately say is that this angle is equal to that one. You agree with me? I can write down angle C2 is equal to angle A4. Right? Why do we say C2 is equal to A4? Let's look at that. What do we call these two angles? Yes, you're going to say it is alternate angles. Right? These two are alternate. So you can just write it is alternate angles. Why is it alternate angles? Because it's AB that is parallel to CE. Right? Now can you see as we go on, indicate on the sketch. Now remember, we need to prove that C2, okay, we work with C2 now, is equal to D1. Now because you work with C2 and A4, these two must have something in common with D1. And let's just look at where is A4. A4 is the angle between a tangent and a chord. There's the tangent, there's the chord. Now remember, what does the theorem state? The angle between a tangent and a chord is equal to the angle subtended by the same chord. A lot of words. So there's the tangent, there's the chord. Which angle subtend? Let's look at these two. These are the chord. Which other angle is subtended by A and C? So if we go up, we can see this D1. You see that, guys? So now we can immediately say, so therefore, A4, right, angle A4 is equal to angle D1. Right? That is angle between the tan and the chord. And so you can write tan chord theorem. And just look at that. If we say C2 is equal to A4 and A4 is equal to D1, you see those two are equal. So what can we derive from that? So therefore angle C2 is equal to angle D1. With me? Right. Now let's just look at lastly the second question, and this is the last one that I would like to do. It says prove triangle ACF. Now where's ACF? That's A, just highlight that, ACF. Prove that that triangle is similar to which triangle? ADC. And where's ADC? Is this one, ADC. See, the one is inside the other one. So if you have triangles, one inside the other one, it's quite easy. You just write down the proof. In this one, there's a common one of A3. So we will say in the two triangles, angle A3 is common. And secondly, in the two triangles, you see what did we prove? This one equal to that one. Right? We can say secondly, D1 is equal to C2. And that was proved in the previous one. And proving two triangles similar, you only need to prove two angles in the one triangle equal to 2 in the other one. So we can immediately say, so therefore, triangle ACF is similar to triangle ADC. And in the last thing, how can I write down a proportion from there? Maybe some of you know about how this works. If you don't, let me give you an idea. AC over AD, right, equals to, let's look at this one, CF over DC, right? And then lastly, equals to first and the last, first and the last, AF over AC. So this is just something that you can work on, proving two triangles similar. From there, you need to write down a proportion. So remember, how do we write it down? The first and the second over the first and the second. The second and the third over the second and the third. And 1 and 3 over 1 and 3. And from there, you can calculate the sums that they normally ask. And this is some of the information that you need. Can you see like this? Prove AD equals to 4AF. You are only going to try to get something like that if you know how to write down this proportion. Okay, learners, thank you very much to some of the wonderful messages that came through. Tambulinieka said a nice, I'm glad that you said that you have a better understanding and you are going to approach this more. Thank you very much to all the wonderful, it's such a lot. Unfortunately, I can't read every single one, but thank you very much for all the wonderful contribution, perfect answers. It's just a pity time is up. I would have liked to complete another 2 questions, but I hope, guys, remember your proportionality theorem and your similarity. It's a question that you will get in your exam in paper 2, right? It's the last part of your exam question. You must know one of them as a proof, and you need to know both of them for sums. But get to know the theorems itself. Proportionality, one side parallel to the other one, divide the two in the same proportion. What is similarity? The 3 angles of one triangle is equal to the 3 angles of the other one. And prove, just look at 2 to 2 in the other one. And once we have that, you can work out that. So from me, I hope you enjoyed the session. I did, just a pity about the time. All the best grade 12 for your trial exam, and especially for the end of the year. Thank you very much and good afternoon.
afternoon, girls and boys, and welcome to our last accounting presentation. I cannot believe that the year has flown by so quickly. My name is Mandy Moyse, and I'm here to present the final accounting lesson of the year for the grade 12s, and the topic we're covering today is manufacturing. Now, if I can say one or two things about manufacturing, it is one of those easy questions that learners generally score the highest marks in the matric exam. So I'm encouraging you to do this question first. This question generally occurs every year in an exam. And remember, for matric accounting, you only cover the financial part, the financial statement part of manufacturing. In other words, the production cost statement. In grade 11, you did the ledger accounts, and that's not expected of you in grade 12. So it will really just be the production cost statement and all its notes, and then obviously working out break-even analysis and those sorts of things, understanding costs. So, girls and boys, it's one of those sections that you can study, that you can apply and get high marks for. So that is my encouragement today. Today, I also just want to wish you well for your exams and say that this is the last leg of your final year of schooling. Most of you have been at school for 12 years now, and a lot of you are going to go on to study further next year. And I want to encourage you to do your best, to try your best, to work your hardest. You've got your trial exams or your prelim exams coming up, so please apply everything. You need to study every day from this day onwards. And I want to commend you for being at school at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to listen to this presentation. But that's enough from my side. Let's start with manufacturing, and I just want to go through a few costs. The one thing that's important about the manufacturing section is knowing how to categorize your costs. Once you do that, then you'll be able to know how to slot the information into the production cost statement and into the notes. So let's start with the costs, and we're going to go to a slideshow, and I'm going to try and work through it very slowly. You don't have to take notes. The slideshow will be put onto the website for you to refer to later on. So let's change to the slideshow. Cost in the manufacturing environment. There are a few costs that you have to be aware of. Okay? Firstly, there are direct costs. Now, these costs are directly linked to the item, to the product. In other words, it is something that you can identify in the product. So for instance, this jacket I'm wearing, which you're going to see later on, the material, the fabric of this jacket, this is the direct material costs. In other words, you can see it. This forms part of the main part of the jacket, so that's your direct costs. Okay, so you have direct material costs, and then you have factory overhead costs. Right, now let's look at direct costs. Direct material cost is the jacket that I referred to, the material of the jacket. And then you get your direct labor costs. Now your direct labor costs are your touch labor costs. In other words, the person who physically made the jacket, who touched the jacket while making the jacket, we attribute them to the direct cost of the jacket. Then you have your factory overhead costs, and there are really three components to factory overhead costs. There's your indirect material costs, and those are the things that you cannot see. In other words, the cotton you cannot quantify as part of this jacket, and that would be the indirect material costs. Then you have your indirect labor costs. Those are people who are on the factory floor, but they did not touch the item. So that will be your factory supervisor, your factory cleaner, your factory security. They're not involved in making the item, so they are indirect labor. And then you have your other factory-related costs, and I will go through that in a minute. So there's your two costs, direct costs and factory overhead costs. Now, your direct materials and your direct labor, those are known as prime costs. So sorry, let me just go through that. There's your direct materials. Like I said, raw materials used to manufacture the product. That is the direct materials. Direct labor, touch labor again, employees directly involved in making the product. So those are your two terms. Then you have prime costs, which is direct costs direct material plus direct labor. So another word for direct costs is really prime costs. And that's a term that you see on your production cost statement. You see the term prime cost, which is really direct materials plus direct labor. Okay, your factory overhead costs. These are the costs that cannot be directly linked to the manufacture of the item. In other words, you cannot see it in the item, but they all form part of the cost of the item. These are indirect costs and factory-related expenses. So what are factory overhead costs? Indirect materials that I referred to earlier on. Okay, any other materials needed to manufacture the item or the product that cannot be identified. And then indirect labor, employees not directly involved in the manufacturing process. In other words, they did not make the item. Okay, that's your supervisor and your cleaners. And then any other factory-related cost, factory depreciation, factory water and electricity, factory maintenance, factory rent, factory sundry expenses, etc. So those are the costs that you find in the manufacturing environment. And you'll see those costs occur when we do our production cost statement in a minute. Now we're going to turn to activity 10 in your workbooks. Activity 10, it's found on page 21 in your question book, and it's found the answer, or the answer sheet is found on page 20 in your answer book. So if you have those in front of you, we're going to be working through activity 10, and I'm going to be repeating those terms over and over, because it's only when you identify what the term means that you'll be able to understand how to pick the information out of your question. Okay, what I'm also going to be doing today is I'm going to be working with 3 different colors, and each color is going to signify a different aspect of the cost, and that will make it easier for you to identify. So, can you go to page 20 of your answer books? And I just want to show you on the answer sheet. Right, here we have question 10.1. The question wants us to complete the direct or raw material cost question. Another word for direct materials is raw materials. Okay, so it's the same thing. When you see raw materials in your question, it is the same as direct materials, so don't become confused. This is a stock account. In other words, what's a stock note? So it deals with stock, and I'll explain to you why I wrote that there. Then we're going to do the direct labor note, and remember the direct labor is the touch labor, and we're going to identify what the touch labor is, and then we're going to do the factory overhead cost note. Okay, once we've done these 3 notes, we're going to do the production cost statement. But before you can do the notes or extract the information from your question, let's look at what is contained in each of these notes. Okay, now for some activities, you'll find more or less information, but generally you'll find the same information. For instance, here, you will always start with the opening balance. So you'll have opening stock here. Okay, that is the raw materials that you start out with at the beginning of the cycle. It can be a termly cycle, it can be a yearly cycle, but however many times you generate your production cost statement, it can just be at the end of a production process. You start with opening stock. Then you're going to put in purchases. In other words, stock that you purchased, and that will be your net purchases. In other words, what you bought minus what you returned. Net purchases will always be what you bought minus what you returned. Then we're going to put in carriage on purchases. And I suggest that when you do this question in the exam, that you actually memorize your notes so that you can fill it in so that you don't become confused. That line is left open because that's just for a total, because we're going to simply take opening stock plus net purchases plus carriage on purchases. So we're going to add these 3 together, and then we're going to minus closing stock. Okay, and your closing stock, because you're going to minus it, will be in brackets. So I'm going to use I'm going to go to my question now, and I'm going to use my pink highlighter to extract the information. So let me put the pink there to extract the information from my question paper. So wherever I highlight in pink, that is the information that we're going to need for this note. So there, direct raw materials, that is what I need. 1st of March 2015, that's my opening stock. 29th of Feb 2016, that's my closing stock. So I'm going to need that amount for this note and that amount for this note. That I'm going to put in as my opening stock, that I'm going to put in as my closing stock. This is a year cycle, so I'm reporting on the financial year 1 March to 28 Feb 2016. Okay, I don't need any other information here. So I'm going to go to my next page, girls and boys, and there again, raw materials. You see, I see the word raw materials purchased on cash and credit. So I'm going to put that in. That's my purchases. Defective raw materials returned. That is going to be my returns. So I'm going to take purchases minus returns, and that is going to give me my net purchases. And then finally, carriage on raw materials purchased. That is my carriage on purchases. So all the amounts that are highlighted in pink, that is what I'm going to use to complete note number 1. So let's do that now. Okay, put that one side. Remember, I said I need to take the 57,900. Okay, then my net purchases will be, and I'm going to try and fit it in here in brackets. I'm going to try and write as small as possible. 1,622,700 Rand minus my returns of 23,100. And I'm going to get a net purchase amount of 1,599,600 Rand. Okay, purchases minus returns. Then my carriage on purchases of 28,800, I'm going to put there. Add the 3 together, that plus that plus that, and I'll get 1,686,300 Rand. My closing stock I've also identified, which is 34,200. And now I say the amount, which is all the value of all my purchases, minus my closing stock. So my raw material cost that I issued to production, or that went into the production process, 1,652,100 Rand. 1,652,100 Rand. Okay, so that there is going to go onto my production cost statement next to direct material. And we're going to look at the production cost statement later on. So girls and boys, all you have to do is memorize your note. Once you know exactly what needs to be placed in that note, then you simply go to your question and you pick the information off. Because one thing with manufacturing, the information's all over the show. But you need to know how to transfer the information from your question paper into your note. If you understand the layout of your note, you will not go wrong. It's as simple as that. Okay, so we're going to look at the next note, which is direct labor. Now I'm going to use a different color, and I'm going back to my question paper. Let's use the yellow. Okay, you don't have to use the color. I'm just using it just to show you the information. So now I'm going to read the information C, which is factory workers in the production process. Number of factory employees working directly. So this is a key word. Working directly on the chairs, okay, unchanged throughout the year, 12 employees. So 12 people worked on the chairs throughout the year. Number of normal hours worked by each factory worker during the year, 1,600 hours. Number of overtime hours by each factory worker, 240. So remember, direct labor, these people make the chairs. There's wage rate, normal, wage rate, overtime. So what we're going to do is, okay, there I have normal time. So I'll take 1,600 times 60 times 12. I'll work it out with you now. Each employee, okay, each employee worked 1,600 hours and earned 60 Rand per hour. Then I'm going to say 240 hours at 100 Rand. It says each factory worker, how many? 12. Each factory worker worked 240 hours and there were 12 of them. So let's calculate that quickly. So I'm going to take 12 employees. Okay, there are 12 people. For normal time, that's normal time, I'm going to say times 1,600 hours. Okay, that's workers. Times rate per hour, 60 Rand. That's by rate per hour. Then for overtime, 12 people worked 240 hours and the rate was 100 Rand. Okay, so that's how I'm going to work out those values. I'm going to get to 1,152,000 there. And someone is working with me. Oh, wait. Did I work it out wrong? I just took it off the answer sheet. Let's see it. 12 times 1,600 times 60. 1,152,000. 12 people times 240 hours times 100 Rand per hour. 288,000 Rand. So, what did I pay my direct labor? 1,152,000. I paid them 1,440,000. That is what I attribute to my direct labor. Now, when you get to this section, you will always find these sorts of calculations. You just have to break it up into number of people, number of hours, rate per hour. And please work out each section independently. Don't have calculations all over the show and you don't know what you're working out. Okay, so girls and boys, we need to be very, very careful when it comes to this type of work. Let me just see if there's anything else with regards to this question. So let's fill it in. Let me just get my answer sheet, sorry. Okay, so my factory wages as worked out is 1,440,000. Okay, now they do say that there's UIF contributions. So I'm just going to look for that amount quickly. Just find my page here. Okay, here it says UIF contributions. I'm not sure if you can see UIF contributions, unemployment insurance fund contributions to be allocated to each specific cost account. Factory workers in the production process, their unemployment insurance fund is 11,520. Now, the contribution is the portion that the employer pays. So that is a factory expense. Okay, because they say factory workers. So that's a factory expense there in the production process. The factory foreman, there's also UIF, and we simply ignore office workers because we're only interested in what happens in the factory. So we're going to add that UIF contribution. You understand that that is an expense to the organization, 11,520. We'll add that together and we'll get 1,451,520. So don't forget, whatever contributions there are that the factory or the employer or the company pays not on behalf of, but pays in addition to the deduction that goes in there. Only the contribution, not the deduction. So we'll put that on the production cost statement later. Now, factory overhead costs. Okay? Factory overhead costs. I need to emphasize again that here we start out with indirect materials. Always put the layout down. Indirect materials. Okay? And let's put in indirect labor. And then we're going to pick off the question, what other information there is. So, with regards to indirect materials is also a stock account. Now remember, when I spoke about this stock account here, let me just take this away here. But untidy. There we go. When I spoke about this stock account, the raw materials account, which is it's a physical stock item. When there's a stock item, there's always opening stock and closing stock. So, the same with indirect materials, the top one was direct materials, this is indirect, we will always have opening stock plus purchases minus closing stock. Okay, so be aware of this. Learners, I found that so many learners make a mistake here, because when it comes to any stock item, we start out the year with items, with stock, okay? During the year, we buy additional stock, and at the end of the year, we have stock left. So in the case of direct materials, we had raw materials left in the storeroom at the beginning of the year. During the year, we bought more raw materials, we returned raw materials, and we have raw materials left. So we say opening stock plus purchases, plus carriage on purchases, minus returns, and then we minus our closing stock. Now the same with indirect materials. We can start out the beginning of the year with indirect materials in the store. Then during the year we buy more indirect materials. We can also return indirect materials that we are not happy with. And then we have closing stock. So that is an amount we're going to look at in a minute. Okay, so let's go to our question once again. And this time I'm going to use the blue. Which one did I use the last time? I used yellow. Remember, I'm going to just put that yellow there just to show that also went in. Okay, so let's look at indirect materials. Factory, here it is, factory indirect materials purchased. There we go. So I bought indirect materials. It doesn't say that I returned indirect materials. So the assumption is I only bought indirect materials. But remember, it's a stock account. So I must have started out with indirect materials. Okay, so turn the page over. There we go. Factory indirect material stock, opening stock, closing stock. So I'm going to say opening stock plus purchases minus closing stock. Because they don't mention that I returned indirect materials, like they said here, I returned raw materials, direct materials. They don't mention that I returned indirect materials. And also, generally, they keep all the information together. So you can see that I'm only going to work with opening stock plus purchases minus closing stock. Okay, so let's do that. Opening stock is 8,100. And I'm looking to see if learners are working ahead. Yes, someone's got the answer already. Well done. Plus 125,900 minus, I'm sorry for working so untidy, 7,400 close brackets, and I got 126,600 for indirect materials. Please don't forget that calculation. Learners lose valuable marks because of that mistake. Okay, so let's look at indirect labor. Remember I said the indirect labor can be the factory supervisor, the factory or the foreman. Foreman and supervisor is the same thing. Factory foreman, factory supervisor, factory security, or factory cleaner. So let's look to see if the company employs those people. So there we have it. And I'm going to continue with the blue because it's factory maintenance, commission to salespeople. There we go. There's definitely a factory foreman, and we have factory foreman UIF. So that is what we're going to consider, factory foreman. And here we have it, factory foreman, that is his annual salary. He earns a salary, transactions for the year. So that's not a monthly salary. Please don't times that by 12. That's also a common mistake that people make. The information presented here is for the entire year unless otherwise stated in an adjustment or in additional information. So factory foreman, that plus that amount. That's going to be the factory foreman's amount, and I'm going to put the amount in brackets. You can see that whatever I put in brackets, that is what I'm going to add together, plus 2410, and it's 243,410. Okay, so there I've got my all-important calculations. Now I'm going to look for any other factory-related expense, and I'm going to list it here. Okay, whenever the activity says office or anything else, okay, the office area, the sales and distribution area, you simply ignore that because there's really three components to a factory. There's the physical factory where the production takes place. Then, attached to the factory, there will be an office. That will not go on the production cost statement because it's not about production. So if they say office rent, you don't consider that. If they say office water and electricity, you don't consider that. If they say sales and distribution rent or sales and distribution water and electricity, you don't consider that. It's only when they mention factory. Okay, so let's go back to our activity. We're nearly done. Here we go. Number D. Number D says floor space. And there you have factory, office, sales department. You're going to ignore office. You're going to ignore sales department. You're only going to consider factory. Now, on the activity, it's going to tell you what the square meterage is. Then water and electricity, it says E. We're going to consider this now. That's why I'm showing this to you. 15% of the amount is allocated to the office. Ignore that. 25% to the sales department. So, if I take 100% minus 15 minus 25, then I'll know that 60% because the rest applies to the factory, and that would be 60%. So, I'm going to calculate 60% of my water and electricity cost. That I'm going to consider when I do my calculation now, and that I'm going to consider when I do my calculation. Okay. Oops. Let me just find that. There we go. Thank you. Right, let's look at other factory-related expenses. Remember, we're picking off information. So now we're just going to have to work our way down and ignore everything that does not fit with the office. Advertising will never go as a factory-related expense. Okay, so you will always ignore advertising. Advertising is a sales and distribution expense. That will always be a catch. Bad debts will also be a sales and distribution expense. Okay, so now they say factory maintenance. Yes, so we're going to consider that amount because it says factory. Okay, we know that there's rent and we're going to allocate it according to the floor space that we just worked out now. So the portion of the floor space, it says here, see information D. Okay, so we're going to look at that. Then, water and electricity. Okay, it says see information E. That was what we spoke about, the 60% we're going to consider. Depreciation on factory equipment. It says factory equipment. If they say depreciation on office equipment, you ignore that. Just factory equipment. Sundry admin expenses we are going to ignore. And then sundry factory expenses we will consider. So, can we do that calculation? Okay, so it's factory maintenance. Okay, we're going to do that there. It's 85,000. That's given. Then water and electricity. According to the floor space, that's 60%, and that comes to 21,600. How did I work that out? 36,000 times 60%. Okay, that's how I worked that amount out. And then depreciation, they give it to us. You don't have to work out the amount, 52,000. And then sundry expenses, is 25,000. And I forgot about rent expense. Rent expense. Okay, remember, that was according to the floor space. So that was 133,000. 133. And it's exactly half of the total floor space. So I'm going to divide that by 2 and I'll show you where I get the amount from. Okay, if you look at this here. Sorry, the wrong one. If you look at this one here, square meters, 1,200 for the factory, 600 for the office, 600 for the sales department. So if I say 600 over 1,200, if I simplify that, I get a half. Okay, but you still could say 133,000 times 600 divided by 1,200 if you don't know how to simplify. But you can see that the total square meterage is 2,400. 1,200 plus 600 is 2,400. 1,200 is half of that. Sorry, my calculation's wrong there. It's 1,200 over 2,400. That is my calculation. My apologies, which is exactly a half. Okay, so girls and boys, once you have completed your notes, once your notes are done, then you can fill in your production cost statement. Now you must remember the production cost statement. So I just want to go to the next slide quickly, very quickly to the next slide, and I just want to talk you through the production cost statement. Okay, the production cost statement is a statement in which the cost of production of finished goods is calculated. So whatever you finished on the factory floor, now you're calculating that cost. Okay, sorry, someone is saying I'm going too fast, but I really have a lot of work to cover, and I only have 20 minutes left. So I'm hoping that you're going to be able to play that back. Okay, so the production cost statement is made up of the following. You take your prime costs, which is your direct materials and direct labor. You're going to plus your factory overhead costs. Now remember, note 1 was the direct material, so we're going to get the information from that. Note 2 was the direct labor, so we're just going to get the information from that. Note 3 was the factory overhead costs. So now that we've finished note 1, note 2, and note 3, we simply copy over the information into the production cost statement. Then, whatever we didn't finish on the factory floor at the beginning of the year, we're going to add back. So we're going to add our work in progress at the beginning of the year, because that's what we started out the year with. Work in progress is basically unfinished goods. Goods that were not finished by the end of the previous cycle. So you have, it's like, let's say you take this jacket, and this jacket was half made. In other words, the sleeves weren't on yet, okay? Or maybe the collar wasn't sewn yet. So it was in production, but it was still in progress. That is unfinished goods. So I have that on the factory floor. I add more raw materials, I add more labor, I add more indirect materials, I add it to the mix, and now I start working throughout the year again. But at the end of the year, I'm also going to have some work in progress. I'm still going to have some unfinished goods. So those things I'm going to take out, and then what my production cost statement, actually the figure in my production cost statement is the amount of my finished goods at the end of the year. So we already have the information for the production cost statement. All we now have to do is copy over our information as we got it. I do apologize for going too fast. Okay, so let's do the production cost statement. There we have it. It's on the next page. 10.2 asks you to complete the production cost statement. Now, it's already almost finished for you, okay? But you have to study. Please study your format. One of the reasons why the learners don't get marks for the statement is because they don't know their format. So I'm asking you, girls and boys, please study your format. That is what we're going to get from our first note, and we're simply going to copy over the information in the total. So now we're just going to put in 1,652,100 Rand. That is the total in our note, our first note. This is a dead giveaway. Okay, remember I spoke to you about prime costs. What plus what equals prime cost? Direct material cost plus direct labor cost. Okay, that equals prime cost. So when you add that together, you get your prime cost. So if you know this formula, then the first part of your production cost statement is already sorted. Okay, note number 2, 1,451,000. Where am I now? 520. So I'm going to add that together, and I'm going to get my prime cost. Okay, I have 3,103,620. That is what I have. Girls and boys, I know that you are SMSing, and I will attend to the SMS right now, but I really just want to get through this work so that I can maximize my time with you. Okay, now what is the total cost of production then? What was my other cost that I had to add? Guess what? My factory overhead costs. Okay, so there I have it. Direct materials, direct labor, factory overhead costs. That goes into your production cost statement. I'm going to add that, and that I'm going to get from my note. I didn't put the total at the bottom, but it's 620,110. Okay. Now I'm simply going to add that amount plus that amount to get my total cost of production for the year. Okay, just for this year, my total cost of production 3,723,730. Okay. Now remember the work in progress I spoke about? Started out at the beginning of the year. Okay. Then I'm going to get a total. It's just simply a total there, no description there. Then I'm going to minus what I did not finish on my factory floor at the end of the year, and I'm going to get my cost of production for the year. So that amount I'm going to find in the front again of my page. Let me just show you where I find that. That amount I'm going to find there. Okay, so there, work in progress at the beginning of the year, work in progress at the end of the year. Okay, there we go. I didn't finish it. It's unfinished items. So I'm going to put this amount in first, and I'm going to minus that amount. Okay, so let me put the amount in, 169,500. That I'm going to add together. So that plus that is going to give me 3,893,230. Then I'm going to subtract my closing stock, 120,600. And then I'm going to subtract, because it's in brackets, it's work in progress, closing, opening. Okay, remember it's always opening and then closing after that. My cost of production of finished goods for the year, 630. And that is my production cost statement. My notes always guides my production cost statement. Okay, so if you understand, firstly, like I explained, if you understand the costs, I have direct costs, direct materials plus direct labor equals prime cost. That's the first part of your production cost statement. Then you have indirect costs, and all your indirect costs put together is actually your factory overhead costs. So when you work that out, that is the next step in your note. Then you know I have unfinished goods that I brought onto the factory floor at the beginning of the year, and then I ended up with unfinished goods, goods that I didn't finish at the end of the year, so I'm going to take that out of production. And then I'm going to get my total cost of production for the year. Now, I know I spoke a lot. It is a mouthful. I cannot get through everything in an hour. So I'm hoping that somehow you will get the recording and go over and over and over this. The first thing you have to do is familiarize yourself with the terminology. It's very, very important. Okay, so the next part of the question, it says calculate the unit cost of production per plastic chair completed. Okay, so I know that my total cost of production for the year was 3,772,630. And someone's working it out? No, no one's working it out. Then I also know, let me just see if there's perhaps more information at the bottom. No, there isn't. Then I know that right at the beginning of the question, they told me that 58,000 chairs were completed. It's on the activity, it's number A. 58,000 chairs were completed during the financial year. Okay, so I take this amount, my total cost of production for the year, divided by 58,000, divided by the units, and I get my total cost per chair is 65 Rand and 5 cents. That is my total cost per chair that I made. And that is it. That's the extent of this work. Girls and boys, they will always ask you to do these notes, okay? Direct materials. Then they'll ask you to do direct labor. If you understand that this is the main component of your item, and they'll also use the terminology. You need to know what direct labor is. They touch labor. They are the factory workers who make the item. And then you're going to have to know what your factory overhead costs are. All your indirect components, these are factory related costs, but they are not directly attributed to the item that is being made. And if you divide it like that, and then you complete your production cost statement, then you are well on your way of understanding this work. Okay. So maybe I should see, I'm just going to try this now to see if I can take any questions. I know I must do one more section, and there are quite a few comments here. Okay, a lot of people were giving me answers. There's no questions that's really being asked. So it was a lot of answers that were given, and thank you so much, girls and boys, for participating. But I need to move on to the break-even point. Okay, break-even point. Sometimes it's a very difficult concept to understand, but not really. So I'm going to try and just explain it very quickly by way of a slide, and then we're going to do the next exercise. So if you can go to the slide. Our next slide, okay, talks about the break-even analysis. Okay, and this is the three components of this section. Firstly, you have to know your costs. Secondly, you have to know your production cost statement. And thirdly, you have to know your break-even. Now, there are different terms. You see, now we're talking about fixed costs and variable costs. So what are fixed costs? Fixed costs are manufacturing costs that do not change. Another word for vary is change with production levels. Okay, example, rent paid for factory, okay, and certain manufacturing overheads and administration costs. Those are your fixed costs. The one that I like to use, or the example that I like to use, is rent. Okay, that's a nice way to explain the fixed costs. Then variable costs, manufacturing costs that vary or change. These costs change. Okay, so the direct materials, direct labor, and sales and distribution. Now let me use the example of the fixed costs. Fixed costs, if I rent a factory space and I produce 5 units, the rent for my factory space is still the same. If I produce 5,000 units, the rent is still the same. So rent is a fixed cost. What is a variable cost? Materials. Direct materials is a variable cost. If I produce 5 items, 5 jackets, I'm only going to buy enough material for 5 jackets. If I produce 5,000 jackets, I'm only going to buy enough material for 5,000 jackets. So my cost will vary. Now, what is break even then? Let's look at the slide again. Okay. Break even is the point where marginal income is equal to fixed costs. Now, I underline the word marginal income, and we'll explain that in a minute. There we go. So, if that is my fixed cost, let's say the blue line, that's my rent. I pay rent irrespective of whether I produce 1 unit or whether I produce 5 units or whether I produce 5,000 units. Okay. Can you see the green part? That's the marginal cost. So, the marginal cost will increase each time I produce more units. If I look, let's say that is the number of units produced. Okay, that's naught there. And let's say that's 5,000 there. So the more units I produce, the higher my marginal cost. The more units I produce, the same my fixed cost is. Okay, so there's your all-important formula. You must take total fixed costs. So another word for marginal income is contribution. Okay, your teachers might have explained to you the word contribution, but marginal income is the same word. How do you get contribution? Selling price per unit minus variable costs per unit. And girls and boys, this information will always be given to you. So you take your total fixed costs over your contribution to get your break even per unit. And I see people have already answered the question, and I'm going to be answering questions soon. I've got about 10 minutes left. Let me just do this question here. Total fixed cost, selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit, which is really marginal income or contribution. So let's go to the question. Okay, let's go to the question. It is the next question. I'll just find the answer here. There we go. Oh, not that one, not that one. Activity 11. Activity 11. Okay. Here we go. let's just calculate the break even. I know I'm jumping now to 11.13. We're doing that one quickly. Okay, and I'll talk through that quickly. So here it says the information, number of tables produced is 12,000 tables. Okay, sales for the year is 480,000. So now you can work out your selling price per unit. Remember, you need selling price per unit. Total fixed costs, that is what you need, so you're not going to calculate. And then total variable costs, you don't need that, you need unit variable cost. Okay, so that we can work out our contribution. So let's take the information and let's calculate this question. Okay, so I need selling price per unit and I need variable costs per unit so that I can work out contribution. I have total selling price, which I don't need, but I'm going to work out my selling price per unit, taking 480,000 divided by 12,000, okay, divided by 12,000, and I get 40 Rand per unit is my selling price. My variable cost, I don't need my total variable cost, I need variable cost per unit. So I'm going to take 300,000 and I'm going to divide that by my 12,000 that I sold. Okay, sorry, that I produced. So it's 300,000 divided by 12,000 and I get 25 Rand. Now I can work out my contribution. Okay, only after working out that amount and that amount. So now I say selling price per unit, 40 Rand, minus variable cost per unit, 25 Rand, and I get a contribution of 15 Rand. So that is my 15 Rand contribution or marginal income. Another word is marginal income. Now I'm going to apply my my formula. Okay, now my formula says total fixed costs, and you're going to have to study, sorry, total fixed costs over contribution. Another word for contribution is marginal income, and contribution is selling price per unit minus variable costs per unit. Okay, however you express that. So my total fixed costs are 210,000 divided by 15 Rand, and 14,000 units is my break even. Now, the question is, and so that's not just the answer, okay? The question is, did this company break even? How many units did they produce? 12,000. They only produced 12,000 units. So, 14,000 units is their break even. They produced 2,000 lower than break even. So this company did not cover their fixed costs. They have underperformed this year and they did not cover their fixed costs. Okay, so let's look at the questions that they will ask around that. Now they'll say, comment on your calculation in 11.3. What advice would you offer crazy manufacturers? Explain briefly. Okay, so now there's all sorts of information that you can give them. There's all sorts of answers that you can give them. The first concern is that when you look at your fixed costs, remember your fixed costs don't change. Your fixed costs remain the same. And the argument is, how would they reduce their fixed costs? Often, certain aspects of labor is a fixed cost. Okay? Now remember, you don't take labor lightly. You cannot just say fire workers. And this is the one problem that when markers mark, learners often say fire workers or retrench workers. Learners, you must understand that there are labor laws in our country and we cannot just fire workers. Okay? So when you answer a question like that, you're going to have to be very, very sensitive as to what you're saying. It could perhaps be that workers are working too slowly. So the one advice that you can give in your answer is send workers on training so that they can be more efficient. Okay, so you want to improve efficiency, you want to improve productivity. Send workers on training. Figure out how to maximize productivity. It could be that workers are working overtime So in the normal time, they're not working and they're not being efficient, but they are expected to work overtime. So there's all sorts of answers that you can give in order to improve productivity. Maybe there's lots of wastage where material is concerned. So reduce wastage is another answer that you can give, okay? And so they have to look at their production efficiency when it comes to that. Maybe they are not cutting smart. So if you have a piece of material, or if you're making chairs, let's say, they are wasting the wood. And so they're using too much wood to make one chair, so there's lots of wastage. So those are all the answers that you can give. I only have 5 minutes, and I wanted to look at some answers. Someone wanted me to explain fixed and variable costs slowly. So let's go back to that quickly. Okay, fixed and variable costs. So if you look at fixed costs, these are costs that do not change. They remain the same whether you are producing 5 units or whether you are producing 500 or 5,000 units. And this is usually rent, certain manufacturing overheads like depreciation will stay the same, and then administration costs. The cost of running your admin block, your secretary, your admin costs, those are all fixed costs that do not change. And so the company has to cover those costs via production. So the more they produce, the more they can cover their fixed costs. Then variable costs are costs that change according to my production level. So if I produce 5 jackets, I'm going to buy a certain amount of material, and there we can look at direct materials, direct labor, sales and distribution costs. Okay, if I produce 5 units, I'm going to use less labor to make 5 units. If I'm going to produce 5,000 units, I'm going to need more labor to produce 5,000 units. So that is the cost that vary. It changes from one situation to the other. And so you have to understand what fixed and variable costs are. Girls and boys, I want to wish you everything of the best for your accounting examination. I know that accounting is one of the first exams that you write, and so once you have that under the belt, it is done. It's a 3-hour exam, and it is a tough exam. There are often 7 or 8 questions, and it covers the full scope of your matric work. You have to know each section thoroughly. I want to give you some advice. Don't necessarily start with question 1 first. If question 1 happens to be the question that you know best, then you start with that question. But start with the question that you know best. For instance, if you know the manufacturing section very well, and this question happens to be question 5, then you page through your book and you start with question 5. In accounting, you don't have to start with question 1. Why am I giving you this advice? Because the work that you know best, you will work through very confidently. And there's some aspects of the work you might not understand, and that is where you'll become stuck and probably lose marks. But then you've got the work that you know best, you've got it done already. You've scored your marks there already. So accounting is not just about working fast, it is also about working smart. Please also don't work too fast that you rush and make silly mistakes, but don't work too slowly that you don't finish your exam. My advice to you from now is practice, practice, practice. You have to, at this point, practice old exam papers. They are on the website. You can download them. You can work through them. You have to expose yourself to as many situations as possible. And then you go into your exam very confidently, and you start the question you know best. You start that question first. I wish you everything of the best, and thank you for tuning in this entire year. Goodbye.